The London Hammer. In June 1934, Max Hahn and his wife Emma were hiking near London, Texas, when they noticed a rock with wood protruding from it. They took the rock home, and years later in 1947, their son broke it open to reveal what appeared to be an ancient hammer encased in the stone. The hammer has an iron head approximately 6 inches long, attached to a wooden handle. The rock encasing it is Ordovician limestone, dated to approximately 400 million years ago, long before dinosaurs, long before even the first amphibians crawled onto land, and impossibly long before humans existed. The hammer became a sensation in alternative archaeology circles. How could a manufactured metal tool be embedded in 400-million-year-old rock? It seemed to suggest that intelligent beings capable of metallurgy existed in the Ordovician period. The hammer was examined by various researchers over the decades. The metal composition was analyzed and found to be 96.6% iron, 2.6% chlorine, and 0.74% sulfur, an unusual composition for modern steel, but not impossible. Creationists embraced the hammer as evidence against evolution and mainstream geology, suggesting it proved the Earth is much younger than science claims, or that the geological dating methods are fundamentally flawed. However, geological skeptics offered a more mundane explanation. The rock encasing the hammer isn't necessarily 400 million years old, just because it's Ordovician limestone. Limestone formations can develop relatively quickly, within decades or centuries, through mineral deposition from water. The most likely explanation is that the hammer, probably dropped or lost by a 19th century miner or settler, became embedded in a nodule of limestone that formed around it through rapid mineral precipitation from limestone-rich water. Such concretions can form surprisingly fast under the right conditions. The wooden handle was radiocarbon dated, but the results were inconclusive because the wood was partially petrified, making standard carbon-14 dating unreliable. However, the style of the hammerhead is consistent with 19th century American mining hammers, not ancient or unknown tool designs. The chlorine content in the metal was initially cited as unusual, but metallurgists noted that chlorine can be incorporated into iron through corrosion processes, particularly in certain soil conditions. It doesn't necessarily indicate unusual manufacturing techniques. What makes the London hammer case frustrating for analysis is that the rock wasn't excavated in controlled archaeological conditions. It was found on the surface, already weathered out of whatever formation it originated from. Without stratigraphic context, determining the true age and origin is nearly impossible. The hammer currently resides in the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. It's displayed as evidence challenging mainstream geology and evolution, though scientific consensus considers it a modern artifact encased in recent limestone concretion. The London hammer illustrates a fundamental problem with out-of-place artifacts. Without proper archaeological context and controlled excavation, even genuinely anomalous objects become impossible to evaluate definitively. The hammer might be a 19th century tool in recent limestone, or it might be something more unusual, but without context, we can't determine which. The Kingoodie Artifact. In 1844, physicist Sir David Brewster reported a remarkable discovery to the British Association for the Advancement of Science. Workers quarrying stone at Kingoodie, Millenfield, quarry in Scotland, cutting through Devonian sandstone, dated to approximately 360 to 415 million years ago, found what appeared to be an iron nail embedded in the rock. The nail was discovered about 8 inches into a block of sandstone from the Kermilly beds. According to Brewster's account, the nail's head was exposed on the surface of the stone, but the nail shaft extended into the rock. The workmen who found it testified that the nail had been completely encased in the stone before they broke it open. Brewster examined the object and confirmed it appeared to be a manufactured iron nail. The head was clearly formed, the shaft showed consistent dimensions, and corrosion patterns suggested it was old iron. The stone encasing it showed no signs of being previously cracked or disturbed. The nail appeared to be genuinely embedded in undisturbed Devonian rock. This discovery was published in the report of the British Association for the Advancement of Science and created significant controversy. How could a manufactured nail exist in rock from the Devonian period, over 350 million years before humans? Skeptics immediately proposed explanations. The most obvious was that the nail had been driven into the stone in modern times and had corroded and mineralized in a way that made it appear ancient. But Brewster insisted the surrounding rock showed no evidence of a pre-existing hole or crack that the nail could have been inserted through. Another hypothesis was that the nail had somehow been worked into the quarry by miners, perhaps dropped into a crack that then filled with sediment and hardened. But the quarry workers maintained they had found it deep within undisturbed stone. A more geological explanation suggested that the nail might have been introduced into soft sediment that later lithified, hardened into rock. If the sediment was deposited in the 19th century on top of much older Devonian bedrock, and if the nail fell into this soft sediment which then hardened, it might appear to be embedded in ancient rock while actually being in much younger material. The problem with evaluating the Kingoodie nail today is that the object has been lost. After being displayed and examined in the mid-19th century, it disappeared from historical record. Without the physical artifact to examine with modern analytical methods, we can't perform dating tests, detailed metallurgical analysis, or stratigraphic studies of the rock matrix. What remains is Brewster's testimony and the published accounts from 1844. Brewster was a respected scientist. He invented the kaleidoscope and made significant contributions to optics. His credibility lends weight to the account, but it's not the same as having physical evidence. The Kingoodie nail case demonstrates how objects that are lost to history can't be properly evaluated. We have a documented report from a credible source, but without the artifact itself, modern science can't verify or refute the claims. The nail remains a historical curiosity, possibly a genuine anomaly, possibly a misidentification, but now impossible to study further. The Morrisonville Chain. On June 11, 1891, the Morrisonville Times in Illinois published an account by Mrs. S.W. Culp, who reported breaking open a chunk of coal in her kitchen and finding a gold chain embedded inside. According to her statement, the coal broke in two and a small gold chain about 10 inches in length of antique and quaint workmanship fell out. The chain's ends remained embedded in the two coal pieces, and when separated, the chain's exact length corresponded to the cavity in the coal. The coal came from the Taylorville or Pana mines in Illinois, where coal deposits date to the Carboniferous period, approximately 300 million years ago. If the chain was truly embedded in undisturbed coal from this period, it would suggest that an intelligent being capable of making gold chains existed during the age of amphibians and primitive reptiles, before dinosaurs, and certainly before humans. Mrs. Culp reportedly kept the coal pieces with the chain embedded as evidence. The account was published in the local newspaper and later picked up by broader publications discussing anomalous discoveries. However, the chain has never been scientifically examined, photographed in detail, or made available for modern analysis. We have only Mrs. Culp's statement and the newspaper account. No follow-up investigation was documented, and the chain's current location is unknown. Skeptical explanations for the Morrisonville chain focus on several possibilities. Coal, despite being millions of years old, has cracks, fissures, and voids throughout its structure. A chain could potentially work its way into such a crack, perhaps dropped by a miner and pressed into a coal seam through mechanical action. Coal can also contain concretions and mineral inclusions that, when broken open, leave cavities. If such a cavity happened to have a rough shape, and if a chain fell into it or near it at some point, the psychological tendency to see patterns might make someone interpret the natural void as having been shaped by the chain. Another possibility is simple misidentification or exaggeration. Mrs. Culp might have found a chain near coal that had been broken open, and in retrospect, or through enthusiastic retelling, the story transformed into the chain being embedded in the coal. Without the physical evidence, we can't determine which explanation is correct. The case highlights a common problem with historical out-of-place artifacts. Accounts exist, sometimes in credible publications, but the actual objects have disappeared, making verification impossible. What makes the Morrisonville chain case notable isn't the object itself, which may or may not have been genuinely embedded in coal, but rather how it became part of a larger pattern of similar claims. Throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, multiple newspapers reported workers finding metal objects, chains, vessels, and tools in coal. These accounts follow similar patterns: coal broken open, anomalous object inside, newspaper report, object then disappears from record. The sheer number of such reports suggests either a genuine phenomenon requiring explanation, or a cultural pattern where similar stories were repeated, embellished, or misremembered. Without physical evidence for any individual case, the pattern remains intriguing but unverifiable. The Salzburg Cube. In 1885, a curious object was discovered by a workman named Riedel while breaking up a block of coal at a foundry in Schöndorf, Vecklabruck, Austria. The object, which came to be known as the Salzburg Cube or Wolfsäge iron, was a small, roughly cubic metal object with a deep groove running around its circumference, resembling a deliberately machined part. The foundry's owner, Isidor Braun, recognized the object as unusual and donated it to the Heimathaus Museum in Vecklabruck. The coal the object came from was from the Wolfsäge coal mine and dated to the Tertiary period, approximately 60 million years ago, after the dinosaurs, but still tens of millions of years before humans. The object measured approximately 67 by 62 by 47 millimeters and weighed 785 grams. Its surfaces showed some irregularity, but the groove running around it appeared too regular to be natural. Several observers noted it resembled modern machine parts or possibly a meteorite that had been worked. In 1886, the object was examined by mining engineer Adolf Gerlt of the Rhenish-Westphalian Coal Syndicate, who presented findings to the Natural History Society of Bonn. Gerlt concluded the object was made of iron and appeared to be manufactured rather than natural. For decades, the Salzburg Cube was cited as evidence of advanced prehistoric technology, or even extraterrestrial artifacts. Its regular groove and geometric shape seemed impossible to explain as natural formation. However, modern analysis has provided a more mundane explanation. When metallurgists examined the object in detail, they identified it as a piece of cast iron, specifically a type of industrial casting. The groove around its circumference is consistent with casting artifacts where two mold halves meet. The most likely explanation is that the object is a piece of mining machinery, possibly a component from a coal mining drill or other equipment, that became incorporated into coal or a coal-like matrix, and was later mistaken as being embedded in ancient coal. Coal mining in the 19th century was messy. Equipment broke, parts fell into coal seams, and as coal was extracted and processed, lost metal components could become mixed with the coal. When such an object later turned up in a block of coal at a foundry, it would appear to be embedded within it. The Tertiary period coal identification is also questionable. Coal deposits aren't always uniformly from a single geological period, and the specific provenance of coal being burned in a 19th century foundry wouldn't necessarily be rigorously documented. Photographs of the Salzburg Cube from the late 19th century do exist, and modern experts who've examined these images consistently identify the object as industrial cast iron, not an anomalous artifact. The object itself has been lost. It was reportedly destroyed during World War II when the museum was bombed. Without the physical artifact, definitive modern analysis is impossible, but the available evidence strongly suggests it was a piece of 19th century mining equipment, not a 60-million-year-old manufactured object. The Salzburg Cube case demonstrates how objects can appear anomalous when context is lost or misunderstood. A piece of industrial equipment, once separated from its obvious context and found in an unexpected location, becomes mysterious, especially in an era before detailed metallurgical analysis was possible. The Coso Artifact. In 1961, Wallace Lane, Virginia Maxey, and Mike Meixel were collecting geodes in the Coso Mountains of California near Olancha. When Meixel cut open one of the geodes with a diamond saw, he found something unexpected inside, what appeared to be a ceramic cylinder with a metal shaft running through it, resembling a modern spark plug. X-rays of the object showed a metallic core surrounded by what looked like ceramic insulation and a hexagonal outer layer. The structure was strikingly similar to a 1920s-era Champion spark plug, but geodes form over thousands or millions of years as minerals slowly precipitate in rock cavities. How could a spark plug be inside a geode? The discovery sparked intense interest. Some researchers suggested the object proved advanced ancient civilizations, or extraterrestrial visitors had left technology in Earth's geological record. The apparent age of the GOD, estimated by some at 500,000 years or more, made the spark plug's presence seemingly impossible. The Coso Artifact became one of the most famous out-of-place artifacts, featured in books and television programs about ancient mysteries and unexplained phenomena. However, skeptical investigation provided a straightforward explanation. Geologists who examined photographs and descriptions of the Aiud noted it wasn't actually a geode, it was a concretion. Concretions are nodules of mineral matter that can form much more rapidly than geodes, sometimes within decades rather than millennia. Further investigation by Pierre Stromberg and Paul Vive Heinrich revealed that the object was indeed a 1920s era champion spark plug. The hexagonal outer layer visible in X-rays matched the hex nut used on champion spark plugs from that era. The ceramic insulator and metal electrode were consistent with spark plug construction. The concretion formed around the spark plug through a natural process. When metal objects are left in certain soil conditions, particularly desert environments with seasonal moisture, minerals from the soil can precipitate around the object, creating a hard nodular covering. This process can occur relatively quickly, within 50 to 100 years. The most likely scenario is that the spark plug was left in the desert sometime after 1920, possibly from a mining operation or abandoned vehicle, and over the following decades, a mineral concretion formed around it. By 1961, when it was found, the concretion had hardened enough to resemble a rock or geode to amateur collectors. The Coso Artifact demonstrates the importance of proper geological identification. What appears to be ancient rock may actually be recent mineral formation. The difference between a geoid, which forms slowly over geological time, and a concretion, which can form rapidly, is critical but wasn't recognized by the finders. The artifact was displayed in a private museum for many years, but is no longer publicly accessible. However, the X-ray images and detailed descriptions that exist allow confident identification as a spark plug in a relatively recent mineral concretion, not an impossible artifact in ancient rock. Metal spheres in South African mines. Since the 1970s, miners at the Wonderstone silver mine near Ottosdal, South Africa, have reportedly discovered hundreds of small metallic spheres embedded in pyrophyllite, a soft metamorphic rock, deposits. The pyrophyllite at this location is dated to approximately 2.8 billion years old, from the Precambrian era, when Earth's atmosphere lacked oxygen and only single-celled organisms existed. The spheres are typically 1 to 4 inches in diameter, made of a steel-like metal, and some have 3 parallel grooves around their equators. Their appearance and regularity led some researchers to claim they must be manufactured objects, impossibly embedded in rock nearly 3 billion years old. Roelf Marx, curator of the Klerksdorp Museum in South Africa, has several of these spheres in the museum's collection. In interviews, he stated that they're a complete mystery, that they shouldn't exist, and that they rotate on their own when displayed in cases, though this latter claim is unverified and likely due to vibrations from foot traffic or building movement. The spheres have been featured in numerous books and television programs about ancient mysteries, often presented as evidence of prehistoric advanced civilizations or extraterrestrial artifacts. However, geologists have identified these spheres as natural geological formations called concretions, specifically pyrite or hematite, iron minerals, concretions that formed through natural mineral precipitation in sedimentary environments. The spheres form when mineral-rich fluids move through porous rock. At certain nucleation points, minerals begin precipitating out of solution, gradually building up in spherical forms. The spherical shape occurs because mineral precipitation happens equally in all directions from a central point, creating natural spheres. The grooves around some spheres are explained by the rock's internal structure and weathering patterns. Pyrophyllite forms in metamorphic environments and develops planes of weakness. As spherical concretions weather, these planes can create groove-like features, not from artificial manufacture, but from differential erosion along natural structural lines. Detailed geological analysis by professional geologists, including studies published in geological journals, confirms these spheres are natural mineral formations. Their composition, structure, and formation mechanisms are consistent with known geological processes. The dating is also more complex than often stated. While the pyrophyllite bedrock is indeed Precambrian, the spheres themselves may have formed much later, when mineral-bearing fluids percolated through the rock. The age of the host rock doesn't necessarily equal the age of the concretions within it. Similar spherical concretions are found worldwide in various rock types. The Moeraki boulders in New Zealand, the Kutu boulders in New Zealand, and Cannonball concretions in North Dakota are all natural spherical formations formed by similar processes, though at different scales. What makes the South African spheres seem anomalous is primarily their size uniformity and the grooves on some specimens. But geological processes can produce surprisingly regular results under the right conditions, and the grooves have natural explanations. The spheres remain on display in museums in South Africa, often with ambiguous labels acknowledging they're controversial. They serve as examples of how natural geological processes can create objects that appear artificial, particularly when we're predisposed to see patterns and design. The Dorchester Pot. In June 1851, Scientific American published an account of a remarkable discovery. During blasting operations at Meeting House Hill in Dorchester, Massachusetts, workers reportedly found a metallic vessel embedded in solid rock. The rock was pudding stone, a conglomerate, from the Roxbury Formation, dated to the Precambrian era, over 600 million years old. According to the published account, the vessel was blown out of the rock by the explosion and broke into two pieces. When reassembled, it formed a bell-shaped vessel approximately 4.5 inches high, with a base diameter of 6.5 inches. The vessel was described as made of zinc-silver alloy with intricate floral designs inlaid in silver on its surface. The workmen who found it reportedly signed affidavits attesting to the discovery, and the object was examined by multiple witnesses. The account emphasized that the vessel had been completely embedded in solid rock, with no cracks or openings through which it could have been inserted in modern times. This discovery seemed to suggest that advanced metallurgists capable of creating decorative vessels existed over 600 million years ago, before complex life even existed on Earth. However, several aspects of this account are problematic. First, the vessel itself has been lost. Despite being described and reported in Scientific American, a credible publication, the physical object has disappeared from the historical record. No museum has it, no follow-up examinations were documented, and no detailed photographs exist. Photography was in its infancy in 1851. Second, pudding stone conglomerate, while old, is a sedimentary rock that can have cracks, voids, and inclusions. It's composed of rounded pebbles cemented together, creating a heterogeneous structure with numerous potential voids. Third, the mid-19th century was an era of considerable public interest in curiosities and anomalies. Newspaper and magazine accounts sometimes exaggerated or embellished stories to attract readers. Without independent scientific verification, such accounts must be treated cautiously. A skeptical explanation might propose that the vessel was a Native American artifact, or even a colonial-era object that had been lost or buried, and was coincidentally found in or near the rock during blasting. In the chaos of an explosion, its exact origin point might have been misidentified. Another possibility is that the zinc-silver composition was misidentified. If the object was actually made of lead or pewter, common in colonial household items, oxidation and mineral deposits from being buried could create a silver-like appearance that was misidentified as zinc-silver alloy. Without the physical object to examine, we can't perform modern metallurgical analysis, proper dating, or detailed examination of the purported inlaid designs. What remains is a 19th century magazine article describing an extraordinary claim, but extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and the evidence has vanished. The Dorchester Pot case illustrates a recurring pattern in out-of-place artifacts. Dramatic discovery accounts from the 19th or early 20th centuries, often published in newspapers or early scientific magazines, describing objects that would revolutionize our understanding of history. But then the objects disappear, leaving only the stories behind. The Malachite Man. In 1968, amateur fossil hunter William J. Meister was looking for trilobite fossils near Antelope Spring, Utah. He split open a slab of shale from the Wheeler Formation, dated to approximately 505 to 515 million years ago, Cambrian period, and found what appeared to be a fossilized human footprint, specifically a shoe print, seemingly crushing a trilobite. The impression showed a clear heel and toe structure, with the heel having stepped on a trilobite fossil. Meister took photographs and brought the discovery to the attention of various researchers and media. The implication was staggering. A shoe-wearing human had walked on muddy ground over 500 million years ago, leaving a footprint that fossilized alongside trilobites. This would place humans, or at least humanoid beings wearing shoes, hundreds of millions of years before even the first vertebrates evolved, completely overturning evolutionary biology and geology. The discovery was championed by creationists as evidence that the Earth is young, and that humans and trilobites coexisted, contradicting evolutionary timelines. Some publications claimed professional geologists had examined the print and confirmed it was genuine. However, detailed investigation by professional paleontologists and geologists revealed the shoe print was almost certainly a natural rock formation. The Wheeler Shale, where Meister made his discovery, commonly contains angular fractures and spalls, pieces of rock that break off along natural plains. When shale splits, it often creates angular impressions that can vaguely resemble various shapes. The human brain is excellent at pattern recognition, sometimes too excellent, seeing meaningful patterns in random formations. This is called pareidolia, the tendency to see familiar forms, faces, objects, in random stimuli. Dr. James Madsen, curator of the Utah Museum of Natural History, examined Meister's specimen and concluded it was a natural rock feature, not a fossilized footprint. He noted that the heel and toe were simply angular breaks in the rock, and that genuine fossilized footprints have characteristic compression features, deformations patterns, and surrounding disturbed sediment that weren't present. Additionally, if a shoe had stepped on a trilobite 500 million years ago, we'd expect to see crushing damage to the trilobite fossil itself, deformation of the surrounding sediment consistent with weight pressure, and other trace evidence of trampling. None of these features were present. The trilobite appeared to be a normal death assemblage fossil, not one that had been stepped on. The case also highlights a methodological problem. Meister wasn't a trained paleontologist, and his interpretation of what he found was influenced by his expectations. He was looking for fossils, found an unusual impression, and interpreted it through the lens of his own pattern recognition instincts. Professional paleontologists who've examined photographs of Meister's specimen note that the supposed stitch marks on the shoe are actually natural linear features in the rock. The heel depression is a spall fracture, and the overall shape, while vaguely foot-like, lacks the specific anatomical features of actual footprints. The Meister specimen, along with several similar ancient shoe prints reported from the same area, remain favorites in creationist literature, but are not accepted by mainstream paleontology as genuine fossilized footprints. The Aiud wedge. While discussed briefly in a previous script, the aluminum wedge of Aiud deserves fuller examination in the context of tools found in impossible geological contexts. The wedge was discovered in 1973 near Aiud, Romania, during excavations along the Mur River. It was found at a depth of about 10 meters, alongside two mastodon bones in the same stratum. The geological layer was initially estimated to be 11,000 years old, based on depth and the associated extinct mastodon fossils. The wedge is made of an aluminum alloy, 89% aluminum, with copper, silicon, zinc, lead, tin, zirconium, cadmium, nickel, cobalt, and bismuth. Aluminum in metallic form requires electrolytic extraction from bauxite ore, a process invented in the 19th century. Before that, aluminum was rarer than gold and couldn't be produced in bulk. Finding an aluminum object in a 11,000-year-old geological context would be revolutionary. It would suggest advanced metallurgy existed before recorded civilization. The object has unusual features: a hole through one end, suggesting it was part of a larger mechanism, a shape that some researchers claim resembles aircraft landing gear components, and an oxide layer suggesting extended exposure to air. However, critical analysis reveals problems with the ancient artifact interpretation. First, the geological age of 11,000 years is based on the layer where it was found and the associated mastodon bones, but this doesn't definitively date the wedge itself. Objects can be deposited into older strata through various mechanisms: river erosion and redeposition, animal burrows, root systems, or human excavation. Second, the aluminum alloy composition, while unusual, isn't impossible for 20th century production. Various aluminum alloys were developed in the early to mid-20th century for specific applications. The presence of unusual elements might indicate a specialized alloy, or might result from contamination during burial. Third, the oxide layer thickness can't definitively determine age. Aluminum oxide forms rapidly in some conditions and slowly in others. Without controlled analysis of the burial environment, oxide layer thickness doesn't provide reliable dating. The most prosaic explanation is that the wedge is a relatively modern object, perhaps from the 20th century, that somehow became associated with the mastodon bones through disturbance of the geological layers. The excavation wasn't conducted under strict archaeological protocols, making it difficult to verify the original context. Some researchers have suggested it might be part of excavation equipment that broke and was inadvertently buried with the fossils, then later uncovered and mistaken as being from the same geological context. Without radiocarbon dating, which works on organic material, not aluminum, or other absolute dating methods, the wedge's true age remains uncertain. It sits in a museum in Romania, an object whose age and origin are contested, representing the challenges of interpreting artifacts without clear archaeological context. Quartz crystal skull tools. In various locations worldwide, particularly in Central and South America, crystal skulls have been discovered. Human skull replicas carved from quartz crystal. While not strictly in rock, they're carved from rock, they present a related mystery. The precision and sophistication of their manufacture seems impossible with the tools available to the cultures that supposedly created them. The most famous is the Mitchell-Hedges skull, claimed to have been discovered in 1924 at the Mayan ruins of Lubantun in Belize by Anna Mitchell-Hedges, daughter of adventurer F.A. Mitchell-Hedges. The skull is carved from a single block of clear quartz crystal, with a separately carved jaw that fits perfectly to the cranium. The skull is anatomically accurate, with detailed features including teeth, eye sockets, and cranial structure. What makes it remarkable is that quartz crystal is extremely hard, 7 on the Mohs scale, and difficult to carve. Traditional stoneworking tools like copper chisels or stone abraders would have extreme difficulty shaping quartz. Some researchers claimed the skull showed no tool marks whatsoever when examined under microscope, suggesting it was carved with unknown advanced techniques, possibly using rotating tools with diamond abrasives or even laser cutting. The mystery deepened when crystallographers noted that the skull was carved against the natural axis of the crystal, a technique that should cause the crystal to shatter. Somehow, the carvers had worked against the grain without fracturing the material. These features led to claims that the skulls were created by advanced ancient civilizations with sophisticated tools, or even that they were extraterrestrial artifacts. However, modern investigation has thoroughly debunked the ancient mystery. In 2008, the Smithsonian Institution and British Museum conducted detailed analyses of several crystal skulls using electron microscopy and other techniques. The results were definitive. The skulls showed rotary tool marks, consistent with modern lapidary equipment using diamond-tipped rotating wheels. Such tools weren't available to pre-Columbian civilizations, but became common in Europe in the 19th century. Furthermore, investigation into the skull's provenance revealed none were found in controlled archaeological excavations. All came from the antiquities market or had uncertain origins. The Mitchell-Hedges skull, despite claims it was found at Lubantun, has no credible documentation of that discovery. It first appeared in a Sotheby's auction in 1943, where Mitchell-Hedges purchased it. The skulls are now understood to be 19th or early 20th century creations, likely made in Germany, which had advanced crystal working industries, and sold into the antiquities market as pre-Columbian artifacts. What makes the crystal skull case relevant to our topic is that these were initially presented as impossible artifacts, objects carved with precision that shouldn't have been achievable by ancient peoples. The mystery was real, genuine precision quartz carving that seemed to exceed ancient capabilities. The solution was that the objects weren't ancient at all. They were modern fakes. But for decades, they were studied as genuine ancient artifacts, demonstrating how assumptions about age and origin can mislead even careful analysis. The crystal skulls serve as cautionary examples. Spectacular claims about impossible artifacts should be investigated thoroughly, including verification of provenance, controlled testing, and consideration of the possibility that objects aren't what they're claimed to be. These 10 cases reveal a consistent pattern in out-of-place artifacts, dramatic discovery accounts, objects that seem impossibly anachronistic, initial excitement and publicity, and then either debunking through careful analysis or disappearance of the physical evidence making verification impossible. Some cases, like the London Hammer and Coso Artifact, turned out to be modern objects encased in relatively recent mineral formations that superficially resembled ancient rock. The rapid formation of concretions and limestone nodules around modern objects can create the illusion of great age. Other cases, like the Salzburg Cube and crystal skulls, were likely modern objects misidentified as ancient, industrial components, or deliberate fakes that entered the historical record with false provenances. Still others, like the Kingoodie nail and Dorchester Pot, come from 19th century accounts by apparently credible witnesses, but lack physical evidence for modern verification. These remain historical curiosities, possibly genuine anomalies, possibly misidentifications or exaggerations, but now impossible to evaluate definitively. The South African metal spheres and trovants demonstrate how natural geological processes can create objects that appear artificial, particularly when we're predisposed to see design and purpose in regular shapes. What's notably absent from this list are clear, unambiguous cases of manufactured objects definitively dated to periods before humans existed. Despite over a century of claims, no object has survived rigorous scientific scrutiny and proper archaeological analysis while maintaining an impossible age. This doesn't mean such objects couldn't exist. Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, but it does mean that the specific cases often cited as proof either have prosaic explanations or lack sufficient evidence for verification. The broader lesson is about the importance of proper archaeological context, controlled excavation, chain of custody for artifacts, and rigorous scientific analysis. Objects found without context, or objects that disappear before they can be properly studied, tell us more about the limitations of historical investigation than about ancient mysteries. These cases also reveal our deep human tendency to see patterns, to be excited by anomalies, and to prefer mysteries over mundane explanations. A hammer in modern limestone concretion is boring. A hammer in 400-million-year-old rock is thrilling. Our desire for the thrilling can sometimes override careful evaluation of evidence. Whether tools exist in rock before humans existed remains an open question, but if they do, they haven't yet been convincingly documented.